Hey guys, I'm here with my co-author and board member of Prospect Place, Jeff Cole, and Amy Green, also a board member of Prospect Place, and we're doing our first interview today for the Paracast, so this should be interesting. Welcome, test subjects.
Hello, John.
And for you guys that are listening at home, we are at Prospect Place right now. I'm on the roads. This is the first time I've done an interview or anything outside of my normal recording environment, so I can't guarantee the quality is going to be the best. And, any loud bangs, smashes, weird noises.
EVPs?
That could be Jeff, or, it could be something actually else in the house here. So just letting you guys know beforehand. So there's a lot of boat trucks and other things that come around here that make a lot of noise, so I'll do my best to edit it the best that I can. So, that being said, how did we first meet, Jeff? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it? Well, first of all, thanks a lot for taking time to return to Trinway and what I firmly believe to be your favorite haunt here at Prospect Place. It's pretty hard when thinking about it, how many miles we've traveled in the past, oh goodness, what, 10, 12, 15 years or whatever that we've known each other, the adventures that we have partaken in together. And then now to sit here in, June of 2023 and to sort of look back, it really sort of fascinates me. Number one, that we haven't killed each other and that we have, survived as long. But thinking back to when we, first met, thankfully, you had a better handle on this than I, but this takes us back to September of 2012. At the time, I had recently moved out to Madison, Ohio, where I was starting a teaching stint. And I remember moving into Madison, arriving. I bought a house out there, but in the process of really sort of getting a lay of the land, taking some trips out there, I drove past the Madison Seminary, which looked like really sort of a really interesting location and one that certainly piqued my curiosity as both a writer, but certainly as I guess, a ghost hunting enthusiast. And I think it was also really sort of a matter of timing because at the same time back in 2012, the fall of 2012, all the ghost hunting shows that essentially broke I don't know about new ground, but certainly the reality ghost hunting shows had become very, very popular. And it's hard for us older, I guess, or more experienced paranormal investigators. There's always sort of that ultimate, primary influence, having seen the shows that were on TV, some good and bad, but we're not here to judge that. We were all sort of subject to it, relative to pop culture. And it was in my desire in learning a little bit about, and, the internet is still relatively new. Venues were advertising, but, doing a little bit of research on my own to learn more about the Madison Seminary and wanting to have this experience of ghost hunting and seeing, what it was all about, because boy, the TV shows certainly made it look like it was something that it truly needed to be experienced. But I really had no formal entree into the place. It was a huge facility. They wanted lots and lots of money. And, I'm just one guy. I'm just a teacher in Madison, Ohio, wanting to learn more about this venue, but also to sort of have this experience. And so back then, the Madison Seminary posted their schedule and the different groups that were scheduled to conduct their investigations. And I think that I had identified there were like 3 or 4 groups that were scheduled within the next, or at least sort of this period of time. I think it was in the fall. Reached out to all of them, basically laying out the story that, look, I'm a local guy, I'm a teacher, I'm a history buff. I'd like to see what this is all about. All of them got back in touch with me that, hey, thanks for writing, but it's sold out to our group, or at least it's just our group. And it was you who got back in touch with me, or at least relative to the reply that, let me talk with my group. I mean, we might have room for you. Let's see what happens. And as it was, you did have room. And as they say, sort of the rest is history. You made room, and we met up in the parking lot of the Madison Seminary and had really a very interesting experience, as I recall.
I'll set the tone on that a little bit, actually, too. When I received this email, and while he says it's just an email, I'm kind of surprised nobody else took him up on this offer, because when I got the email, it was probably the most well-written email I've ever got. As far as people wanting to join a team or have an interest in the paranormal, that type of thing. And you even sent me the Madison Seminary floor plans. Which is above and beyond already. So once I seen this, I kind of sent a message to Mike and Drew at the time, and I was like, well, what do you think about this guy? And this is a little crazy, but we have a teacher up in Madison that's asking about joining us, and normally we don't allow other people into our private investigations and such, but something about that email, I just knew it was going to haunt me for years to come, and, well, here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, there is no second chance to make a good first impression, kids. You have no idea who you're dealing with. And as I say, everybody really, responded very, very positively, very friendly and cordially to the inquiry. It's ironic to think about it and to look back that, as I said before, we've managed to maintain our friendship as long, really, to how different in many respects we really are to each other. But, opposites attract, I guess, maybe.
Death metal kid and was it an elementary school teacher at the time?
Middle school close
teacher?
Enough.
Yeah, that's one hell of a combo there. And Amy, we'll get to you, of course, when we get to Prospect Place. I don't think I'm leaving you out over there.
That's okay.
So I've been asked this a couple times, of course, about the book, Ghostly Encounters, Confessions of a Paranormal Investigator. And we give a little bit of information on how that came to be. It's Jeff, like I said, he had joined the team. We did a couple investigations. And one day I remember getting an email about this book project that Jeff's working on. And anybody that knows me, I'm pretty reserved. So even this podcast, coming out here and doing this myself, was kind of a big deal to get me out of my shell a little bit, to actually come out and experience and promote things that we do. But I remember this email, and you're like, well, I'm writing this book. Would you be interested in, co-authoring it, or, helping out with some of the evidence and such as well? And I remember at the time, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll see. And like, if something happens and you get some kind of offer or something, just, let me know, and maybe we'll work something out. And I kid you not, it was maybe a week later, the first person you inquired to, which is Skyhorse, which they've been great to us. We appreciate it. They already had an offer in hand, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Because honestly, I didn't expect that, because you get involved with these projects and sometimes they don't materialize or other things happen, which it's just how it turns out to be. I'm used to the music industry, and that's how it always was with that. And then, next week we got a contractor, and I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, but something, that's an interesting story unto itself, how the overall concept of the book came to be, and ultimately, obviously, how we worked together to get it written. But, there's sort of a space between the time that you and I had first met at Madison Seminary to the point that you and I, or at least I guess I became sort of an adjunct member of the group and started spending more time. And originally the book was entitled The Paranormal Protocols, which is, sort of interesting unto itself. But really what Ghostly Encounters, Confessions of a Paranormal Investigator, and it wasn't towards the end that I truly realized that really what the book turned out to be was kind of a memoir. Because in that period, after we had met to the point that I became an adjunct or a member of the team, was that I had sort of loosely affiliated with a couple of other teams that were doing paranormal investigations in Northeast Ohio, one in particular which will remain nameless at this given point. But I had gotten involved with a team that was really, it was a loose group of friends that would get together and go to very easily accessible, supposedly haunted locations, and really just sort of standing off in the background, engaging the best I possibly could. But it was really sort of watching how this team operated and conducted their investigation, which every bit of, and I say with all humility, with an undergraduate degree in anthropology and archaeology and graduate studies in anthropology and archaeology, and having done my share of field work and survey work, I may not necessarily be a Jedi master when it comes to the scientific method, but I'm very familiar with how traditional scientific processes, methods, experimentations, investigations should go. And to sort of watch from the sidelines, sort of the chaos that was supposed to be an organized investigation, it became very, very clear to me that there were no rules necessarily, or there were no protocols to doing paranormal investigating. And, it's all fine and well to get together to have a good time. But at that given point, and I think still to this day, there is a heavy emphasis of what a lot of investigators refer to as data collection and gathering evidence. And if you're going to collect data and you're going to evaluate evidence, it has to be from a purist perspective. It needs to be assembled, collected, and evaluated really through some pretty stringent, consistent methodologies. And this was not the case. So in many cases, sort of my experience, baptism by fire, I had had enough experiences in terms of paranormal investigating. I had captured evidence, or what I refer to as evidence, because I had control over my devices and I knew what my voice was and I knew what was there originally. So I was beginning to really sort of grow and become excited with the field as it was, but really sort of the chaos that was taking place relative to the leadership of these different investigating teams was really sort of bothersome to me. That if you were to do it, if you were going to conduct an investigation, maybe there should be some hard and fast rules. And if not hard and fast rules, there ought to be consistencies in terms of how the investigation is operated, right, possibly some of the people that are involved, and how you look at this evidence.
I am kind of picky, as you know. But, we always ran with a smaller group. And if you're trying to get evidence, especially EVPs and audio, and there's 300 people present, you're not going to know what's an EVP, what's not, that type of thing. If you have a small group of people, usually we were about 2-3 people, you can have better control over the environment and what's going on. And you don't have to worry about who's stomping around in one room and who's in the other. And if you get a really reliable group of people, you can trust the other individuals you're with, and you can have a pretty good investigation. Sometimes you're going to get some evidence, sometimes you're not.
Absolutely.
It just depends on the location, its personality, and conditions at the time. What happens?
I tend to think that there's some things that you have control over, other things that you don't. And the best that you're able to maintain sort of best practices, there again, no hard and fast rules. It's not an exacting science. It's not a recognized science, but there are ways of minimizing contamination from other people or environmental factors. There are ways of controlling that.
Yep.
And the better control you have is with the fewer people that you have involved with it. And so it was really sort of from that perspective, I was able to see how I did not want to participate in, I've got better things to do with my Friday and Saturday and Sunday nights, or my nights, or my spare time, than to essentially run off into a cemetery or into a building with a dozen other people who are more focused in on the equipment that they're carrying, irregardless of the 10 people who are running circles around them in the backyard or behind them with the different types of gadgets and so forth. There's no way that you're going to be able to collect anything that is credible.
Exactly. And we was talking briefly about how the book was named. I think this would be kind of a funny inside joke for some of the folks that have read the book or have been up on us over the years. Do you remember how that was named?
Well, yeah, it started out with Paranormal Protocol, but the publisher didn't like it. And I think, to your credit, as soon as we got the rejection on the initial title, it was Paranormal Protocols, Confessions of a Paranormal Investigator, which I thought actually had some nice alliteration to it. But they said no, that they didn't think it would effectively capture the audience and the demographic that we were looking for. And you very quickly piped up, this is all about marketing, Jeff. It's not about anything else. I'll tell you what, they're going to go for something that will appeal to a broader audience. I'll bet that if we submit ghostly encounters, that they'll jump on that. And I remember submitting the alternative to them, and I think that, sort of like the book deal itself, it was a couple of days, and yeah, we like that. We can work with that. And bada bing, bada boom, we had a title.
Yeah, after we knew it was rejected, Jeff submitted a list of about 20 names. And then I submitted 5. And I told him, I said, I bet this is going to be the one they take. And they were like, oh, yeah, whatever, that type of thing. And I kid you not, within what I think was the next day, they looked at the list and we had like 25 different options, and that was the one they went with. So I kind of, busted your balls about it a little bit and had some fun with it. And we had a title, and we went from there.
Absolutely. You can't underscore enough, really, how serendipitous being sort of at the right place at the right time relative to you and I and our investigation, and sort of how the formation of the book came to be. You may not recall, but at the time that you and I started working together, I was in the process of trying to sell a manuscript. As I mentioned before, I'm a former archaeologist. I had put together a manuscript on North American archaeology and prehistory, written for young people and for students. And I had gotten several archaeologists in support of the project. I had a pretty massive manuscript that was together, and I had gotten an agent who was interested in selling it, really believed in it. And so we were out there trying to hawk this. I had always wanted to be, I guess, the Carl Sagan of North American prehistory, particularly to young people. And it was a book that needed to be written, and it satisfied the scientist inside of me, presenting new and fascinating information on North American prehistory. Put a lot of time and effort in the construction of the manuscript, and nobody would buy it. We did multiple rewrites, and nobody would buy it. I'd been pushing this, or I should say my agent had been pushing the manuscript, trying to find buyers and so forth, and nobody would buy it. Nobody was interested in archaeology. Nobody was interested in North American prehistory, regardless of whether it was for kids or for adults. It just wouldn't sell. There was no interest in it. As I was developing a really bad taste in my mouth of working, or at least learning more about paranormal investigating, of how it shouldn't necessarily go, and then sort of getting together with you and the C-Bus team and having a totally different experience, it really very organically came together. There's really sort of a story here. And I remember bringing it to you that, I think this will sell, that if we're able to sort of string these different sort of investigations together in conjunction with the experience that I have, I'll bet you we could make something of it. And on top of it, at that time in technological history, QR codes were the newest thing, the latest and greatest. And Hey, wouldn't it be neat if we wrote a book where we could sort of paste in these QR codes and to take the reader right to the audio or the video evidence? Wouldn't that be a cool idea? Do you think that would work?
When it was first presented to me, I'm pretty technologically advanced, I would think. But at the time, it was still fairly new, and I was trying to figure this out myself, because I'm getting asked about bit links and QR codes and other things that I've never messed with in my life. And I'm like, this would be a presentable way, because then we could attach the videos, audio, that type of thing. And that's what we ended up going with. And we've actually had a couple other authors reach out to us since, and they've been asking if they could do the same thing. And we don't have any trademarks or ownership on it or anything like that.
That's true.
But it adds a lot to the story. I mean, you occasionally will get that one reviewer that'll be like, well, I want to read what's going on instead of hear it. But with this book in particular, it was made to be more interactive.
But I tend to think that it was a combination, really, of sort of a fresh approach to the paranormal investigating scene as well as the technology. So we put together, you and I put together the manuscript. We had it all together, and really, like I say, I'd been trying for over a year to sell an archaeology manuscript, and I think it was really a matter of 2 weeks that we had a bite, that they wanted to see more. They wanted to see more, not just the treatment, but, the manuscript, which I think that we were probably about halfway through. I have author friends who have gone the traditional route of publishing that have never heard of anything like that before. So it was really quite fortuitous that we had captured something that was really sort of in its moment at the cutting edge, that really sort of certainly caught the publisher's attention, and certainly set us on a great adventure, because it was at that point, now we needed more content. We knew we had to make it. We had about half a book at that point, and then we started to have to talk about deadlines. Well, when's it going to be finished? When would we be able to go to print or press with this?
And that's when we had the serious time crunch. We'd be investigating sometimes 2-3 locations a month, and it seems like every month I was reviewing more and more audio and video. And I can thank you for all of that experience of being burnt out on audio and video review. But
yeah, well, we also had I think the worst we ever had was like a doubleheader on a weekend. Hit 2 locations in 2 separate states, over the span of a week. And because, we both had full-time jobs. Of course, in the summertime, it was a little easier, at least for me, because as a teacher, I had a much easier schedule. But a lot of these investigations went on during the spring and the fall when I was in class. And you've always been working. So,
well, the investigation we were talking about, for those that are interested, is when we did the Bell Nursing Home into St. Albans Sanatorium, which is 2 states away. And I remember we just wrapped up at Bellevue. It was really early in the morning. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. The neighbors were having a serious party that night, apparently. So all we were hearing was country music and a lot of laughing and that type of thing through the walls of this place. And
total bust.
It was a little rough on the audio review front, let's put it that way. And then we went to West Virginia. We fell asleep at one of the rest areas real quick, and I remember waking up to some lady slamming their door right next to my head. That was fun. And we were up and off again, probably not even 3 hours after that. We made our way to Virginia, and yeah, I never let you book back-to-back investigations in 2 different states ever again. But it was fun. It was just a very busy time period. And after that, I kind of needed a little bit of a breather, just to back off a little bit and be like, whoa, paranormal overload there for a minute. But it was definitely worth the experience, and it was fun. And obviously we enjoyed doing the book, and it's been fairly successful considering, some other authors' numbers. So I've been happy with where we ended up on that. It's been a couple of years now, and we occasionally get people asking about a sequel and such, but to be honest, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, maybe.
We'll occasionally get a royalty check. We've moved beyond the advance. So, that I think in a lot of respects, certainly in the business world of publishing, speaks to itself. So there's still interest, and it's still very exciting to have been a part of that project, to have made that happen.
And from other authors we've spoken with in the past, it's very hard to get out of the black. So once we were past that, I looked at it as an achievement in its own right. And we did a lot of cool conventions, and like the panels, those were always fun because you never knew what kind of questions you were going to get. And we had fun with it there for a few years. And lo and behold, when everybody noticed we kind of disappeared for a minute, well,
we're tired.
We were tired, and we started getting involved with Prospect Place Mansion, as we've talked about in the past on the Paracast. And the house officially got dropped on us in about 2017, and we got joined by Amy and some other folks later, and we had a really long process as far as not only trying to restore the house and where we're at, but also on the history front. Amy's been a big help, of course, on the family side, and I've dug into the legends, and we've made a pretty good tag team combo on that front that still persists to this day.
Yeah, but you know something, how all of us really, including Amy, were drawn, dragged, however you want to put it, drawn into this place, and our ultimate involvement in terms of the organization that owns Prospect Place is really sort of fascinating. I know that relative to you and me, John, our involvement, came through the paranormal investigating. We had been here certainly enough times and had established sort of the rapport with George Jeffrey Adams, the previous administrator for the place. And, without getting into the myriad of challenges and troubles that the property was in, it was, there's something about this property that if you were here even once we have heard from investigators who've only investigated once or have come by for a visit. There's certainly something about this property that, I don't know, it sort of gets into your blood that you want to see it survive. You want it to be successful. Obviously, G.W. Adams was a very wealthy man, very influential for his time. But, if you look at the history of Prospect Place, it certainly had its period of despair and sadness. But ultimately, I think it was out of love that this building was made and has managed to survive the way that it did. I don't know if it was just a conversation between George and myself that made him like us, our involvement as volunteers and so forth. But the last thing in the world I ever thought that would happen would be that we'd get pulled in or asked to participate at more than, painting a wall of a historic landmark, a federally recognized historic landmark. And then to essentially have it handed to us and, adios, guys, I got to go. There's too much going on in my life. My health is deteriorating. I don't want to do this anymore. Here are the keys. You guys take over. I'm out of here. There were more reasons to say no to it than to say yes. But at the same time, with the time and involvement that we all have had with it, we knew that if we didn't take it, that it would have been demolished. I think that there was a date with a wrecking ball. There was a huge debt with the county and the state. There were just an overwhelming number of challenges. And I don't know, I remember coming to you, and George was essentially dangling the keys and taking you off to the side and saying, dude, I'm not going to, unless you do, I'm not going to do this unless you do this with me. And it was like, I think we both gave each other side glances and we took the keys. And there started a new chapter in historic preservation and certainly C-Bus Paranormal. Amy's involvement, ironically, was in the first few years. Well, maybe I ought to let Amy tell this.
Yeah,
I've been yammering on quite enough here. So, Amy, there's the microphone. How did you get sucked into this?
She was kidnapped.
Oh, no. Gosh, I first literally found this building when I moved here over 30 years ago. I took the car and was driving around trying to figure out my way around the area. And I passed the grove of trees, and all of a sudden this big brick building just comes out of the cornfield. And it captures your attention. And everybody tells me that too. Oh, I was just driving by and, I saw it. And that's how it was for me. And, I pretty much stalked the place for 30 years. So, anything to do with it when it was open for tours, I'd come for tours. Anything, I'd walk cemeteries, I'd go to the library. I would do as much as I could, just here and there, not really strong research kind of stuff. But I would, always stay in touch with it. There were, ghost hunts offered back in the day, and I did a few of those too. So it's just always been a part of my life. I think the first time I met you was for the masquerade ball. Mm-hmm. And I was dressed as Winifred Sanford, and I walked up to you and said, "Master."
That's a great first impression.
That was
she was
first
stuck
quiet
since.
So the very next day I brought in all of my research stuff and I forced it on you guys. And here, look at this, look at this. And so after
and it was
that,
like, hey, John, check this out.
Right? I mean,
we need to call somebody, call an ambulance.
we had been here for a while, and I mean, as far as the local community, they heard most of the legends and the things that were going on around the place, but to find somebody that was actually interested in the research and wanted to look into it further, was kind of a lesser known experience for us at the time. It's like everybody else just kind of just took the legends and ran with it. And then Amy came in presenting actual, evidence and documentation, which is always a plus. And we had a pile of paperwork to look at. I'm like, all right, well, this is interesting. This is fun. This girl stalks dead people in houses, so it works out pretty good. That's right up our alley.
And Amy also intimately knew the G.W. Adams family, as you can imagine, with a name like that, was extensive. And she knew, like almost verbatim, the different relations, the different generations. And it was just, oh my God, this is somebody we need.
Yep.
So, what are you doing for the next, handful of years? Or how'd you like to join us? We're trying to save this place. I think it was, a conversation like that. And, but I just think it's fantastic because it started out as ghost hunting, and now the three of us are sitting here doing a round table. And the fact is we've all had sort of our own sort of experiences here, but we sort of moved to sort of a different level, I think, of involvement, certainly relative to our involvement in historic preservation. But I mean, Amy is certainly the official and recognized historian of the G.W. Adams Educational Center. Her knowledge and expertise relative to both local history as well as the family history and the mansion history far exceeds anybody who we've ever met before. So what might have been a sort of a weird fetish at one point has proven to be absolutely invaluable. Speaking as the chairman of this outfit, that her work, along with yours, Jonathan, has advanced our knowledge, our understanding of reality, and separating the myth from the legends, and bringing a truthful recollection and recounting of the history for this small section of Muskingum County. And it's an important history, and that can't be understated, I don't think.
With her research on the history alone, I mean, it allowed me to kind of focus on the legends and such, and it gave me some breathing room. So you doing all of the actual personal aspects of it, the family aspects of the house, that went a great deal. We'll get into that here a little bit in a minute as well.
Nights that you and I were texting and messaging at night at 4 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
You'd find something, you'd want to share it with me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's cool, and I'm trying to open one eye and respond. And
she did pretty well with that, though.
I tried to keep it.
I mean, we've had conversations from everything from the photographer of the photo we had of George Adams to all the train wreck stuff that we're going to be getting into here in a future episode. And the history of this house was very important because it's been kind of exploited a little bit over the years because everybody's so sucked into the legends and the craziness of everything that was presented on TV. Thanks, TV groups. But it's just one of those things where it was really good to see the actual history come to life. And it took us a little while to get our feet on the ground to get the house where it needed to be presented. But I think now we're getting more focus on the history and a little bit away from the paranormal side. But at the same time, as we've talked about before, you can't have history without the ghost and the ghost without the history, whatever you think of ghost being as. Those were people, they were living, and they were involved with this property, and I think it's very important that we bring them back to the forefront.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Paranormal investigators, it's time to start planning for your upcoming investigations and to also stock up on new ghost hunting devices. Thankfully, GhostStop has you covered. GhostStop has everything you need to advance your team's research and theories. They have digital recorders, camcorders, thermal imagers, EMF devices, laser grids, and much, much more. If you need it, they likely have it. Our team has used several GhostStop products over the years. Click the GhostStop link on this episode's information panel or on our website at cbusparanormal.com, and you can browse through their extensive catalog and place your order today. By using the show's affiliate link on our player and website, you'll also be supporting our show, and this lets GhostStop know that we sent you. GhostStop, paranormal equipment made by investigators for investigators.
And before we get a little bit more into this discussion, if you guys haven't heard the first 2 episodes I did on Prospect Place, I highly recommend going back through our archive and listening to those, because there is a lot of important information on that. Plus, it gives the history and some of the things that we've already corrected. So we're going to kind of pick up from there and kind of just get into some of the new things going on with the property. As far as the house in general, have you guys had anything new paranormal experiences wise, or anything new on the history front you guys want to discuss?
Absolutely. There's several people that have passed here, but most people are unaware of how many and who they were. And there's also, regular investigations. We had a public hunt last week, and a lot of cool things came up from that too.
Yeah, this place has always been active for me. I mean, as with any location, they always seem to have their own personality and things that seem to happen at certain locations. And Prospect's always been one of my favorites as far as on the investigation front. Well, you and I have talked a couple times one-on-one, and there are 3 individuals that most people don't even know existed, honestly, and they've never been presented on TV. They've never been on any of the online blogs or the information sheets, anything of that nature, that kind of got lost to history. And we also believe that they possibly died in the house.
These 3 individuals are an infant named Florence Adams, G.W. Adams' son James Adams, and Sophia Robinson, who is Mary Adams' sister.
Can you give us a little bit of information on these guys?
Sure. Florence was born in, February of 1871. But she passed away in July of 1871. She was only like 5 months old. Most likely, any baby that passes away at that time would have been in their own home, not in a hospital or anything. So she's probably the first death in this house that we would know of. The second one was James. He was 21. He was George's oldest son, and he died one day after George's funeral. And so this kind of starts a big grieving period for Mary. And then the third one that you mentioned is Sophia. Sophia visited Mary here at Prospect Place in November of that same year of 1879, when George died and then James died. And then Sophia visited, and she also died here. So we don't know why or how any of the 3 folks died, including the baby in 71, but George and James and Sophia in 79. I've been able to read a journal from a person who was friends with George. His kids ran around with his kids, each, they were friends. And he kept a journal. His name was Horace Smith. He kept a journal almost every day of his life, and he'd write a 1-line entry into that journal. And on the day that George died, it was August 31st of 1879, he wrote, G.W. Adams passed at 7 a.m. this morning. He had a consumptive chill. And we don't know exactly what that meant, but, he was 80 years old by then, so, he could have very well got pneumonia or anything. And then George had a big funeral on September 2nd, I think. And the very next day, his son James passed away. And again, Horace wrote in his journal on the 4th. The only thing, though, that he said was that James, son of G.W. Adams, passed and was buried today. He didn't say why or how, but it was the very next day that he was buried. So it was a pretty quick burial.
And that's going to lead to some speculation as well. Obviously, we don't have the answers to this question yet, or what happened to him. And I find it really strange. If you look up the death records, George W. Adams, his death is listed and it's marked. However, you go to James, who happened very briefly after that, he's not in the records at all. So I mean, back in this time period, it's a really weird time period because you have not only GW passed, you had James, his son, passed very shortly after, and then you have Sophia passed right in that same ballpark, which is really strange. So I'm not sure if it's possibly something that was going around at the time, if it was possibly something more than that. Obviously, James, his death is very suspicious being that close to GW, and especially for as young as he was. So that's new information for the listeners out there that maybe watched the TV shows or things that's been out there previously that never did any research, and 3 individuals that possibly died in this house that's never been covered. So as we keep digging into this history even more, I mean, who knows what we're going to find?
Absolutely. I think all these people who lived at this time was just a fascinating time. And anything could have taken you out back then, but these 3 seem to be a little suspicious.
Right, especially, like I said, in that close of a time period. When we've talked about it, it's really strange. And Mary's sister was actually buried close to where I'm from, so I thought that was kind of strange as well. And maybe with time we'll have some more information. But that journal itself that you speak on has been invaluable as well. As most of you guys know, I've done a lot of research on Blackburn, the bricklayer of Prospect Place, and there's even some articles on him in there talking about some of his criminal exploits. So it's been invaluable, and there's so much history in that journal that can help document what's already been researched or give us new leads and more information.
Absolutely. And I think that it's also important to, I don't know, maybe state the obvious that a lot of this new information is coming to us from essentially obscure sort of journals, not necessarily being covered by local news, news media, the press, newspaper articles, and so forth. So, if you are yourself an avid researcher, particularly as it relates to historic locations, relationships with the paranormal, it's oftentimes you get the best nuggets from sort of the least expected or some of those obscure resources that are not necessarily covered. I mean, we're highly suspicious of the nature of James' death, it happening as quickly or so closely to the funeral of GW. It certainly is intriguing, a little on the suspicious side, but was not covered in the least. You would expect that from a prominent family, a death so close to the death of GW himself would be covered in the press, and there's not a single word about it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times I do deep dives into the newspaper archives, and they do help tremendously. But in a case like this, where it was completely not covered, it certainly makes things, as we've stated, it's suspicious. And we'd kind of want to learn a little bit more about that. So hopefully with more time, we'll be able to figure out what's going on with that. And again, it just adds new stories and a new layer to the actual known stories of the house, and some, in cases, paranormal legends that people can research and investigate.
Yes.
Well, Jeff's been in Georgia recently because he moved away a long time ago. Traitor. Amy and I have been up here since the new year, and we've been doing a lot of work on the 1912 train wreck. And of course, that's been sensationalized over the years by our good friend Zach Baggins and his crew, where they said that the victims were brought to the house and all of that. We've briefly covered it. No, that wasn't the case. But everybody's always been kind of curious about where it happened at, and well, I found it. So Amy and I, we've been spending some time out there, and we're going to cover it here on a future episode, but we drug Jeff out there at one point. Did you have any experiences or anything you wanted to say about that?
Experiences, no, but I mean, I think that when you look at it geographically, from a common sense perspective, if you know where the wreck site is in relationship to where the mansion is located, it's pretty obvious that Prospect Place Mansion was not utilized in the capacity of a field hospital or to triage patients. It would have been, and it was a heck of a lot closer to treat who could be treated there, and then take victims, survivors into Zanesville. But it's in the absence of clear research and really sort of doing the gumshoe legwork to find out where these locations are at. In the absence of good research, this is how I think legend and myth sort of evolve.
And for you guys that are listening at home, I don't know what's going on outside, but we have some police cars or something going on out there, as you probably heard on the audio. Just is what it is. I told you this is going to be an interesting experience. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of weird that the story kind of went from one thing to another, which we've discovered on a lot of the legends that we've either fixed or had a better understanding of what actually happened. And it was really fascinating. So, like I said, New Year's Day, Amy and I are out at the crash site trying to figure this out. And to see it in person and actually to experience it, it's kind of interesting knowing where this happened at, what happened at the time, and then also seeing the actual location itself of where we believe the impact was as opposed to where it ended up. And we'll get into some of that as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add to the train wreck, Amy?
Not really. I think what you've said really clears it up, but it was just a very interesting site to go and visit. I really enjoyed it.
It's a very interesting story, especially with the subjects involved. And as most people know, I'm really big into the history front. So when that episode airs, definitely check it out. Maybe you'll get a whole new perspective on this famous legend that you've heard and, well, misheard about. It's time for people to understand what actually happened that day.
I think that it's time truly for truth. And you know what I find sort of heartening is the fact how these legends and myths begin. We can speculate until the moon turns blue. I tend to think objectively when Prospect Place was sort of coming into its own as a nonprofit where previous owners and administrators were attempting to make something of really a derelict building. Anything that really sort of connected with death or terrible experiences, became opportunity or possible fodder for, the creation of myth, the creation of legend. And though that might have been useful, 20, 30 years ago when Prospect Place was first being sort of reinvigorated for its next chapter of life, it was convenient, but obviously it's in the modern era, in the present tense, that we're able to take a hard look at a lot of these stories. I was here last night, a private group came in, and I really sort of took it to heart and felt really good that the group that came in has been well connected with the building, have investigated here many, many times throughout the different administrations, and their focus on the historical fact. There's enough history in buildings like Prospect Place that you don't really need to whip in any air or any falsehood. The true stories are truth enough, and it is not necessarily a reflection that the place is either more or less haunted, if in fact that's what you believe. It's a closer focus on what the truth and what the reality is. And so to have younger investigators come in as followers or supporters of the property, and to really sort of appreciate the efforts that the organization has taken, the board has taken in terms of a new and better look, careful look at the historical facts, it's appreciated. And so it warms my heart a little bit that all the hard work that you, Amy, we as an organization have taken to set the record straight really has not taken away from the ghostly activities that may very well, depending on who you ask. We're very careful. And as I sit here talking to you, and I remember, talking to you about this a little bit before, that at least in my current role as chairman for the organization, we walk a careful line between the historical fact as versus the paranormal activity that takes place here. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are registered with the state. Though we are a venue, our sole purpose is not that of ghost hunting. So that when I talk about it as an officer for the organization, I try to be as careful as I possibly can. I certainly have my personal beliefs, but as the chairman of the organization, I have to balance my personal beliefs more so as it relates to the property itself, which is obviously a historic landmark. And that is where, really, as an organization, our focus needs to be. We are forever grateful and indebted to our paranormal friends who come here, make donations, investigate, which is why I have my personal experiences. But of course, I'm never too far away from the fact that as an officer for the organization, my personal beliefs need to be kept a little bit separate, I think, as it relates to the identity of the building and how we present it to the public as being certainly the historic gem that it is. And so stories such as, the train wreck, really do a disservice and have in the past as far as the truth and the reality of the history of Prospect Place Mansion. And whether it's related to ghosts or whatever, as I've said on numerous occasions, that, there's enough rich history here at Prospect Place and at other historic locations that you really don't necessarily need the phantoms. You don't need the demons. You don't need all the fiction that's whipped into it. If you're able to take the time and to do the research, do the legwork, learn the real stories, whether you believe in ghosts or not. If you do believe in ghosts, there is certainly ample tragedy and sadness that we and also happiness that surrounds properties that are 175 plus years old. So it's just natural. You don't need to build in any additional drama, I don't think.
Exactly. And when we first started this, we wanted to keep the legends away from the actual history as well and make sure the history was accurate. So while the legends are fun for the ghost community, don't get me wrong, fact trumps these legends, and it's very important to do your proper research and make sure that the stories and the messages that you're trying to present come across as such. So that being said, off the record, technically on the record, I guess, Jeff, what would be your favorite location overall that you've investigated over the years?
Oh man, that's a toughie. Hell, I'm chairman of the board here, so that's got to speak to something. I don't know if there's necessarily, I have a great deal of love and respect for Prospect Place. I have had remarkable experiences here. That being said, I cannot, in my overall paranormal investigating experience, diminish other places. Our time spent in Gettysburg with a good strategy when we were out there and the EVPs caught there was extremely profound experience. And then there was also Edinburgh Manor, the retirement home out in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, catching audible or, disembodied voices. But I also still keep coming back, I guess, ultimately my favorite location surely has to be Prospect Place and just the diversity, I guess, of the type of, like audio that we've captured here when you're getting female voices and there are no women in the building at the time. And you're getting dialogue sort of back and forth. That is pretty profound.
Yeah, this project's truly a labor of love in many ways, from our time spent here to just the experiences we've had. Obviously, as I've stated, these haunted locations or alleged haunted locations seem to have their own personality. So that's probably right up there toward the top of mine as well. And I've always loved this place, and I'm really proud of you guys, what you've kept doing with the property ever since I've retired from the board. Just keep up the good work. And as far as the house itself, this, Prospect in general, what's been your most interesting experiences here?
Amy?
Well, I'll have to say, even though you know this one, one of the first days that I was here by myself, I was sitting in the dining room. I knew I was all alone, and there were footsteps in the hallway. And they just seemed to be coming closer and closer and closer to the door. And I know my eyes were getting as big as pancakes. And I'm all by myself. I couldn't call for help or anything. So I'm like, okay, this is it. This is how I go out. But then they stopped at the doorway. So when you talk about having a personality to the place, I think of that experience as maybe they were just checking me out to see if I was appropriate to be here.
Well, we've talked about the footsteps on the other episodes of the Paracast too. It is usually one of the common things you'll hear from groups. So it doesn't surprise me. And at that point, I just thought it was kind of funny when you told me it's your first day of opening here by yourself as far as a board member. And then, you're already getting the attention of the locals. So that was definitely an interesting experience. And Jeff, what was probably your...
I don't know. I think that usually the best experiences are the ones you don't realize that are happening until you have a chance to either look at videotape or to listen to audio. Well, a striking experience, ironically, was when we were conducting actually a board meeting, and there was a shadow that really sort of looked around a corner and caught my eye, and it was in the middle of a business session. And I was like, well, what the hell was that? And I remember just sort of getting up in the middle of the meeting and going to look to see. It appeared somebody, was in the common hallway looking into the room. And of course, there was nobody there. I also, in this place, I enjoy sitting in the basement where typically in the summertime, it's very cool and comfortable. And I like watching the shadow figures that are sort of bouncing back and forth between two different rooms. Is always very exciting to me. But that's off the record. What about you, John? What are your high points here at Prospect Place?
Well, I mean, fun fact, it's funny that you speak of the basement because Jeff, the first time he was ever here, we had the DVR set up. It was Jeff, Mike, and I. And I have the camera aimed right in the wine cellar area of the basement. And it's the darkest part of this entire house. And I just remember getting on the walkie-talkie and just telling you to make friends. And that was your first experience of Prospect Place, being put in the darkest room possible and just letting you feel it out and see what you experienced.
I also remember up in the ballroom that you set up the camera and also said the same thing. And then what was it? Mike Hale said, "I see two eyes." So I don't know if it was a bat who had found his way in, but that was a fun memory.
I think it was an IR reflection of some kind, but on the screen when I remember playing it back, it looked like there were two eyes right next to you, so it was kind of funny. But yeah, I remember that distinctly as well. On the prior episodes, I did talk about the footsteps that have been here, kind of similar to Amy. I had my stepson here with me. We were opening up one day, and we came to the landing of the first floor, and this is after we cleaned up the rooms above us just to make sure everything was clean from the group that was there the day before. And we went out, put the flag out, came back in the first floor, and we start hearing footsteps. It happens about 2 minutes. He's looking at me, freaking out, and I'm just kind of trying not to laugh too hard. And it just stops after 2 minutes. And that was my first experience in this house, too, as there were 3 of us at the time. We heard footsteps around what we thought was the first floor. We went down to the first floor to check. We got to GW's bedroom and looked up, and we was kind of feeling the environment, and footsteps were happening above us, too. It was, again, right about 2 minutes every time this happens, and it just seems to stop and does its thing. Is it a residual haunt? Possibly. Is it just a weird, creaky old house? It makes you think a little bit, especially when it doesn't happen anytime before that or after that for your nights, and it just happens when it wants to, day, night, whatever the case may be. But other than that, I've never had any visual evidence here, but I've always had some really good EVPs. And I think when you have EVPs that relate to the environment you're in and the story of the house or the actual location that you're at, it really gets interesting because then you move on from the occasional ramblings to something is it self-aware? Is it not? And it really makes you think. And this location has always been one of those locations where it seems more often than not, you're getting direct answers to what you're saying sometimes, and really makes you think about things, even for skeptics like me.
Well, that's true. That's very true. When I think about sort of the dialogue that we caught, of voice 1, what are they doing? Voice 2, I don't know. That's well beyond a residual type of, there's an interaction that is sort of I don't know, second or third person. It's removed from you. They're not interacting with you. They're interacting with themselves. And that's a unique situation to sort of experience.
Especially when you're just walking around and you have something that's basically reacting to you that you're not even aware is there, and you don't even know until you pull it up on audio later.
Right.
It really makes you wonder, and the further you go down that rabbit hole, who knows what we'll find here in the next couple of years and new information that may come out.
We'll keep on looking.
Appreciate you guys joining me here today, literally on location. It's good seeing you, especially coming from Georgia. It's good of you to grace us with your presence from time to time. And Amy, it's always good to see you. And if you guys want to learn more about Prospect Place, you can go to the official website at gwacenter.org. They can schedule public hunts. You can come and visit on the weekends between 12 and 4 p.m. For history tours, and just check the place out. Like I said, it's always been one of my favorite locations, and it's definitely worth a visit. As far as the book, as we briefly talked about today, you can always order from us directly or Amazon or wherever you may find it.
Wherever fine books are sold.
And if you order it from us, I mean, I have signed copies I'll send your way. And you can, of course, get those on cbusparanormal.com or ghostlycounters.net. Once again, guys, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next month. Thanks for listening.